The door hissed open before Captain Vera could react, and Queen Salthera stormed through it like winter itself had taken form. Her crystalline armor caught the dim light, fracturing it into 1,000 sharp edges. Vera's hand went to her sidearm but froze halfway. Protocol demanded she ask permission before drawing on royalty, even when royalty violated every security measure in the compound. "Your Majesty, this sector is—" "Where is he?" The Queen's voice carried that peculiar resonance her species produced when rage and grief collided. Her scales had gone from their usual deep violet to a mottled gray-white, the color of old ice. Vera stepped aside, not from fear but calculation. The Queen would see what she came to see regardless. Better to control the situation than let it explode. Cell 14. He hasn't moved in 6 hours. The corridor stretched before them, lined with transparent aluminum cells. Most stood empty now, evacuated when the prisoner in 14 began his peculiar dying. The Queen's footsteps rang against metal flooring, each one measured despite her fury. Vera followed 3 paces behind, close enough to intervene, far enough to show respect. They reached the cell. Inside, the human sat on the floor, back against the wall, arms wrapped around his knees. His breath came out in visible clouds. The temperature gauge on the wall read -12 Celsius, and dropping. Frost coated every surface, the walls, the floor, the single metal bench. It crawled across the transparent barrier like living fingers. The human's lips had gone blue. His skin showed that grayish tint that meant hypothermia had progressed past shivering. He stared at nothing with eyes that barely focused. "He's dying," the Queen said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Vera kept her voice neutral. "The environmental controls malfunctioned 4 hours ago.
We detected the temperature drop immediately.
Protocol requires authorization from the High Council before we can enter a cell containing a war criminal." "You called for authorization?" 3 hours and 47 minutes ago." The Queen's crest flared, a display of pure rage that made Vera's hand twitch toward her weapon again. "And, they're deliberating. He saved my daughter's life. There it was, the reason the Queen had violated her own security, had come to this detention level unguarded except for Veira's patrol. The child. Little Princess Noria, 7 years old by human reckoning, who had wandered into a collapsed section of the palace during the siege 3 weeks ago. This human, Corporal James Rourke of the Terran Marines, had found her there, had pulled her from beneath a fallen beam, had carried her through enemy fire back to Sulfuran lines, taking 2 plasma burns in the process, had handed her to the first Royal Guard he encountered and immediately tried to retreat. They'd shot him anyway, not fatally, but enough to bring him down. War criminals didn't earn mercy for single acts of decency. He's also responsible for the orbital bombardment that killed 4,000 civilians, Vira said quietly. The attack that destroyed the southern hatcheries. The gas attack on... I know what he is. The Queen pressed one hand against the transparent wall. Frost spread from her touch. Her species' involuntary response to strong emotion. Another sign of how badly this was affecting her. I know exactly what he is. I read his file. I memorized every crime. Every death attributed to his unit. Then you understand why the Council deliberates. I understand that my people value justice. The Queen's hand remained on the wall. I also understand that my daughter asks for him every day. She doesn't know what he did. She only knows he was warm when he held her, that he made funny sounds in his language that made her laugh while they waited for rescue. She knows he bled for her. Inside the cell, the human's head tilted slightly. His eyes found them, though Vera doubted he could see clearly anymore. His lips moved, forming words without sound. Vera had studied human expressions during the war. She recognized this one. Sorry, he was apologizing. To the Queen, for dying where she could see it. The Council's decision serves justice, Vera said. Personal feelings cannot... Open it, said Direct Order Captain. Every regulation she'd ever learned screamed against this. The human was a war criminal. He'd been tried in absentia and found guilty of crimes that should have earned him execution. Saving the princess had earned him a commutation to life imprisonment instead, and only because the Queen herself had argued for it. But to save his life now? To intervene in what amounted to a mechanical execution, however unintentional? The political consequences would be catastrophic. If I do this, Vera said slowly, if I override the Council's authority on your order, you'll face sanctions. Possibly removal from the throne. I am aware. Your daughter will lose her mother to politics. The Queen's crest flattened completely. a sign of absolute resolve. My daughter will lose her faith in justice if we let him freeze. She's 7, Captain. Old enough to understand that we imprisoned the man who saved her. If she learns we stood here and watched him die slowly when we could have prevented it, what will she think of the system we claim serves justice? What will she become? Vera looked at the human again. His eyes had closed. His chest barely moved. The captain made her decision. Her fingers moved across the tablet, entering override codes she'd hoped never to use. The cell door began to unseal with a sharp hiss of equalizing pressure. Cold air rushed out, carrying the bitter scent of frost and human fear sweat. The queen moved immediately, faster than Verai expected. She crossed the threshold before the door fully opened, dropping to her knees beside the human. Her hands, naturally cold to human standards, probably felt warm against his frozen skin. She pulled him forward, away from the wall, supporting his weight against her armored chest. Captain, medical team to detention level 4, cell 14, emergency priority. The queen's voice carried absolute command now. The rage burned away to leave only purpose. Hypothermia victim, human physiology, critical condition. Veira was already calling it in, her training overriding the part of her brain that screamed about regulations and consequences. Medical responding, ETA 90 seconds. He looked at the queen holding him, and something like confusion crossed his blue-tinged face. His lips moved again. Princess? Safe, the queen said. Noria is safe. You kept her safe. Good. The word came out slurred. That's good. His eyes closed again. The medical team arrived in 73 seconds. Veira timed it. They swarmed the cell with thermal blankets, stimulants, warming IV fluids. The queen stepped back only when they physically needed her space, and even then she moved just far enough to let them work. Veira watched it all, already composing her incident report in her mind. She'd probably lose her commission over this. The queen might lose her throne. The human might die anyway, despite their intervention. But the queen was right about one thing. Princess Noria would remember this moment, one way or another. Would remember what her people chose when mercy and justice stood in the same room and demanded different things. The medical team lifted the human onto a hover stretcher. His vital signs had stabilized slightly, but he wasn't out of danger. The lead medic, a grizzled veteran named Thorax, caught Veira's eye and gave a slight shake of his head. Not good odds. The queen followed the stretcher as they moved it toward the exit. Veira fell into step beside her, resuming her position as guard without being asked. Whatever else happened, she wouldn't leave her queen unprotected. He might not survive, Veira said quietly. No. The council will demand answers. Let them. They walked in silence for a moment, following the medical team's rapid pace, through the detention-level corridors. Other guards had appeared, forming a protective detail around the queen without discussion. They'd all heard what happened. They all understood the implications. They came anyway. The queen stopped suddenly at an intersection. The medical team continued toward the infirmary, but she stayed frozen, one hand pressed against the wall. Her scales had started to return to their normal violet, but patches of gray-white remained, like scars. I wanted him dead, she said, when they brought him in. When I saw the plasma burns on my daughter's hands from where she'd grabbed his armor, I wanted to kill him myself. Veira said nothing. Sometimes silence served better than words. She told me what he said to her, while they waited. He spoke in his language, but she understood the tone. He kept saying, okay, you're okay, over and over, like a prayer. Like if he said it enough times, it would be true. The queen's hand fell from the wall. She straightened, and Veira saw the monarch return, pushing back the mother who'd momentarily shone through. Contact the council, the queen said. Tell them I'm coming to explain my actions. Tell them I expect a full investigation into the environmental system failure. Tell them... She paused. Tell them I'll accept whatever judgment they deliver regarding my interference. Yes, Your Majesty. Behind them, the empty cell stood open, frost already beginning to melt in the warmer corridor air. Evidence of what almost happened. Evidence of what they'd chosen instead. Veira activated her comm. This is Captain Veira to Council Chambers, requesting emergency session for Queen Salphira. Priority Alpha. Request acknowledged. Council convening in 1 hour. 1 hour. Enough time to get the Queen to safety. Enough time to verify the human's condition. Enough time for Veira to finish her report and accept the consequences. They reached the detention level exit. Beyond lay the palace proper, where news of this incident would already be spreading through the courtier networks like fire through dry grass. Political enemies would sharpen their arguments. Allies would scramble to defend the Queen's actions. The careful balance of power that kept their government stable would shift, possibly irrevocably. All because of one human. One enemy soldier. One war criminal who'd saved one child. The Queen paused at the threshold, looking back the way they'd come. Vera knew what she was thinking. The human's file contained detailed accounts of his unit's actions during the war. Villages burned, civilian transports destroyed, chemical weapons deployed against population centers. But it also contained his surrender statement, transcribed verbatim. 3 words, spoken to the guard who'd finally captured him after the failed retreat. "Is she alive?" He'd asked about the princess before asking about his own fate, before requesting medical attention for his injuries, before anything else. "He's not innocent," the Queen said. "Mercy doesn't require innocence." "No," Vera agreed. "It doesn't." They stepped through the exit together, into whatever came next. Behind them, in the empty cell, frost continued to melt. Water pooled on the floor, gathering in the spaces where the human had sat, where he'd chosen to face death quietly rather than beg for help. The environmental system's malfunction would be investigated. Sabotage or accident, it didn't matter now. The damage was done. The human would live or die in the infirmary, surrounded by guards and medical equipment. The Queen would face her council and defend her choice, knowing it might cost her throne. Vera would submit her report and accept the consequences of following an illegal order. And Princess Noria, 7 years old and innocent of politics, would ask again about the warm human who'd held her while the world collapsed around them. Her mother would have an answer now. Not the answer anyone expected, but an answer nonetheless. The palace systems registered the detention-level environmental anomaly as resolved. The cell door sealed automatically, locking away the scene of almost execution. Security footage captured everything, time-stamped and archived, ready for the investigation that would follow. In the infirmary, the human's core temperature climbed degree by painful degree. His body fought hypothermia with the stubbornness his species had become famous for during the war. The medics worked with desperate efficiency, knowing they were treating a war criminal under the direct order of their queen, knowing their careers might end because of it. They worked anyway. The council convened. Arguments began. Politics and justice and mercy collided in the ornate chambers where the future of their civilization was debated and decided. Some demanded the Queen's abdication. Others praised her moral courage. The debate would rage for hours, maybe days. But in the infirmary, in that moment, a human's heart continued beating. A queen stood before her peers and defended her choice. A guard captain filed a report that would end her military career. And a little princess slept peacefully, unaware that the universe had bent slightly toward mercy, just this once, because her mother had decided that justice without compassion was simply revenge wearing formal clothing. The frost melted completely. The water evaporated. The cell waited, empty and cold, for whatever came next. Above it all, the war continued in distant sectors. Humans and Saltirians still killed each other over territory and resources and old hatreds that had outlived their original causes. Peace negotiations proceeded with glacial slowness, each side unwilling to compromise, unwilling to show weakness. But in one palace, on one world, a queen had chosen differently. Had seen an enemy dying and saved him anyway. Not because he deserved it, not because it was politically wise, not because it would end the war, because mercy, real mercy, didn't ask those questions. It simply acted. The human would wake eventually, confused and restrained and facing a lifetime of imprisonment for crimes he'd actually committed. The Queen would weather the political storm her choice had created. Vera would find new purpose after the military inevitably discharged her. And years later, when Princess Noria grew old enough to understand, she would ask her mother about the day in the detention level, about the choice between justice and mercy, about what it meant to rule with compassion even when it cost everything. The Queen would tell her the truth. All of it.
The human's crimes.
His single act of decency. The moment of choice in that frozen cell. And Noria would understand that leadership wasn't about making easy decisions. It was about making right ones, even when they destroyed you. Especially then.